right, in today's lesson, we're moving on into checking accounts. Today, we're going to understand how checking accounts work, and we're going to complete a bank check register. So let's get started. For example 1, it says Allison currently has a balance of $2,300 in her checking account. She deposits $425.33 paycheck, a $20 rebate check, and a personal check for $550 into her checking account. She wants to receive $200 in cash. How much will she have in her account after the transaction? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is actually fill out this deposit slip so that we're familiar with how that works. So, up here, we'll say we have Jane Doe. And actually, we don't need to do that. We've got Allison. So we'll say that it's Allison. And today's date is 12/31. So the first thing that says here is cash. This would be how much cash are you putting into the account? And if you look at it, she's not putting anything into the account. So we're going to actually line that out. The next thing that it says is list checks singly. So that means list each individual one separately. The first one was her paycheck, and it was $425.33. Notice each has its own column. I have a dollars and a cents column, and that's how I list it. The next thing was a $20 rebate check. So I have $20 going in there. And finally, I had a $550 personal check that somebody had given her that she's depositing there. There's no fourth check, so we're going to line through there, and then we're going to subtotal it. So when we add all of these values together, I end up with $995.33. So the next column here says less cash received. So that means what cash is she getting back? Well, it says here that she wants to receive $200 in cash. So we're going to list that right there. And finally is a total. So we're going to subtract the less cash received, and the total balance is going to be $795.33. Now, some things you might see that I did. Notice that I did line out any area that I was not going to use. Why do I do that? Well, I do that because anytime you fill something like this out, it can be manipulated, meaning somebody can do something with it to change it. Let's say you didn't have cash back, but somebody got a hold of this afterwards, and they added that in, and then they made it look like you only wanted $795 going into the account. They get the cash, they walk off, and you're out your $200. So as a safety precaution, I always fill out everything on the deposit slip. Now, the one thing that we haven't done is you'll see right over here, it says sign for any cash back. So right here, Allison is going to go ahead and sign her name. And that should be done in front of the teller. When you go to the bank, you don't want to sign that early, just like you don't want to sign checks before you're there in front of the bank. Again, that is a matter of if somebody were to take that check, they could forge a signature on it, and then you're out that money. So the question here says how much is in the account after the transaction? Well, we know that she had $2,300 in the account because it tells us that right there. And we know that she's adding $795.33 in. If we're to total this, we now know that her new balance is $3,095.33. Please press pause and complete this you do. When you're done, press play, and we'll go ahead and get started again. All right, it says here that Lizzie has a total of X dollars in her account. So that's her current account balance. She makes a deposit of B dollars in cash and 2 checks that each are worth C dollars. She would like D back from this transaction, and she has enough cover to cover what she wants back in her account. Express her new checking account balance after the transaction. Well, we know that her current balance is X. And to X, we're going to add that cash in B dollars. It says that there are 2 checks worth C. So I've got 2 checks that I've got to add in there at C. And then she wants D dollars back. So if I combine my like terms here, my final algebraic equation is X plus B plus 2C minus D. How'd you do? All right, for the second example, it says here that Nick has a checking account with the Park Slope Savings Bank. He writes both paper and electronic checks. So what that means is he writes physical checks that he hands to people or he mails into people, but he also can do things electronically where it's pulled out of his account and he doesn't have to write a check. It says for each transaction, Nick enters the necessary information, the check number, the date, the type of transaction, so looking here, check number, date, type of transaction, the payment amount, and he's got all of that listed in his account. It says determine the balance in his account after the Star Cable Company check is written. So Star Cable Company is down here. So all we're going to do is go ahead and finish out what happens here. So it says that he wrote a check for $1,721. So over in this white area, we're going to subtract $1,721. And when we do that, we get $1,951.27. So now we've got that taken care of. The next one, it looks like Kate's Guitar Hut, and Nick bought some strings there for his guitar. So now we're going to subtract $32.50. And notice each time after I put in the amount, I'm subtracting or adding it, in this case it's subtracting it, to get a new updated account balance. So the area here in blue is your updated account balance. The next thing we see here is that Nick deposited a paycheck in the amount of $821.53. So there it's going to be a plus sign, $821.53, and we're going to add that to the $1877 for a total of $2,740.30. The next thing, we have Verizon Wireless. It's right here, and it was for $101.50. It's coming out of the account, so again we have a subtraction sign. We subtract that and we end up with $2,638.80. Finally, we get to the last transaction that we were going to do, and that is the Star Cable Company, and it was for $138.90. And again, it's subtracting because it's coming out of the account. And once we do that, we end up with a balance of $2,499.90. And that is the account balance after all of these checks and deposits are recorded into the check register. Please press pause and complete this last you do. When you're done, press play and we'll go back. All right, here it says that Nick writes a check to his friend James Sloan on May 11th for $150.21. What should he write in the check register? That's the first question. And what should the new balance be? Second question. So let's go back to our check register. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and write it down below the last entry. So we know that it was check number, it was a check, and it was $32.73. Now some of you might be asking, how do I know what check number it was? Well, if you notice here where the check number is written, they go in numerical order. So he wrote 3271, 3272 was the last check that he wrote. So in writing this check to Mr. Sloan, it was the next check, which was for check number 3273. It says that he wrote it on May 11th, so we've got 5/11 for the date, and it was made out to a Mr. James Sloan. So that goes under the transaction description. And it was made in the amount of $150.21. So that's going to be subtracted from this value. And when we subtract it, the new balance is $2,349.69. And that's it for this lesson.